The carousel sat in water up to its painted horses' bellies, half submerged in the brackish pond behind what used to be Riverside Amusement Park. From the highway, you could just make out the peaked roof of the carousel house. Its once bright stripes faded to the color of old bruises, listing at an angle that suggested the whole structure might slide beneath the surface at any moment. Catherine Wells stood at the edge of the property line, her daughter Lily's hand gripping hers with the kind of desperate pressure that came from a child who'd learned that good things didn't last and bad things came without warning. The November wind cut through Catherine's thrift store jacket, the one with the broken zipper she'd meant to fix 3 months ago, but never found time between double shifts at the diner and trying to make $847 stretch across rent, utilities, food, and all the invisible expenses that accumulated like snowdrifts. The letter from the county had arrived on a Tuesday, forwarded from their old address to the motel where they'd been living since the eviction. Official letterhead. Legal language that took Catherine 3 readings to fully comprehend. Her grandmother, Margaret Shun, had died 6 months ago. The funeral had happened without Catherine knowing, distant relatives handling arrangements for a woman Catherine hadn't seen since she was Lily's age. But Margaret had left something. One asset, unclaimed and abandoned for so long that the county had nearly seized it for back taxes. A carousel, a structure described in county records as severely dilapidated and potentially hazardous. The property had been assessed at $850, an amount that barely covered the legal fees for transferring ownership. The letter included a clause that made Catherine's chest tighten with familiar dread. Buyer responsible for all restoration costs, environmental remediation, and structural removal if structure is deemed unsalvageable. She'd paid the $850 with money that should have gone toward Lily's winter coat. The one from last year still fit if you rolled up the sleeves, and Catherine told herself that was good enough, that they'd manage, that somehow this carousel would be worth more than the gamble she couldn't afford to make. Lily tugged on her mother's hand, her 7-year-old voice small against the wind. Is that really Grandma Margaret's? Yes, baby. That's it. It looks like it's sinking. Catherine forced something that might pass for optimism into her voice. Maybe it's not as bad as it looks. But even as she spoke, she knew that was a lie. It was exactly as bad as it looked, probably worse. The carousel house had collapsed on one side, exposing the mechanical works to decades of weather. The horses visible above the waterline showed paint peeling in long strips, wood rotting beneath. The entire structure leaned at perhaps a 15-degree angle, suggesting the foundation had given way, that the ground beneath was too soft to support the weight it carried. They'd driven here in Catherine's Honda, the one with 187,000 miles and a check engine light that had been on so long she'd stopped seeing it. Lily's backpack sat in the back seat, stuffed with the few things that mattered. A stuffed rabbit named Mr. Buttons, 3 library books about horses, and the drawing she'd made last week of a house with a red door and flowers that didn't exist anywhere except in a child's imagination. Can we go see it up close? Catherine hesitated. The property looked unsafe, the kind of place where tetanus and worse things waited in rotting wood and stagnant water. But Lily's face held hope so fragile that crushing it felt cruel. We can look from the edge, but you stay right next to me, understand? They picked their way through overgrown grass and scattered debris, rusted ticket booths, fragments of carnival signs, the skeleton of what might once have been a fun house. The pond spread before them, its surface covered in algae thick enough to walk on. The carousel rose from the water like something from a fever dream, beautiful and ruined in equal measure. Catherine counted 12 horses visible above the waterline, each one carved with details that suggested craftsmanship from an era when carousels were built to last generations. Even through rot and decay, she could see the quality, the flowing manes, the jeweled saddles, the expressions that seemed almost alive despite years of abandonment. Lily crouched at the water's edge, studying her reflection in the murky surface. Why did Grandma Margaret leave it here? I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe she couldn't afford to fix it. Like we can't afford to fix our car? The comparison landed with the weight of truth Catherine couldn't deny. Yeah, like that. A voice called from behind them. masculine and carrying authority that made Catherine's shoulders tense automatically. "You folks shouldn't be here. Property's condemned." Catherine turned to find a man in his 60s approaching, wearing a county inspector's vest and an expression that suggested he'd had this conversation many times before. His name tag read Robert Martinez. "I own this property," Catherine said, pulling the transfer documents from her pocket. "Just got the paperwork last week." Martinez took the papers, scanning them with practiced efficiency. His eyebrows rose slightly. "You're Margaret Chin's granddaughter?" "Yes." "Did you know her?" "Met her once, maybe 15 years ago, when I was inspecting properties for potential code violations. She came out here every week, rain or shine, just to sit and look at this thing." He gestured toward the carousel. "Never went near it, never tried to salvage it, just looked, like she was waiting for something." Catherine felt something shift in her chest. "Waiting for what?" Martinez shrugged. "She never said. But I'll tell you what I told the county assessor when they asked about demolition costs. That carousel's a death trap. The whole structure could collapse at any moment. You'd need special equipment just to safely dismantle it, and the wood's probably contaminated with lead paint. You're looking at $50,000 minimum to properly remove and dispose of everything." The number hit Catherine like a physical blow. $50,000. She had $93 in her checking account. "I don't have that kind of money." "Then you've got a problem, because the county's going to require removal within 6 months or start fining you. The property's been flagged as a hazard for years. Only reason they haven't done something about it is because nobody wanted to pay for demolition. Now it's your responsibility." Lily had been listening to the conversation, her small face processing information in the way children do when they understand more than adults realize. "Can we at least look inside before they tear it down?" Martinez started to shake his head, then paused, studying Lily's expression. Something softened in his face. "Tell you what, I'll give you folks 15 minutes. I need to walk the perimeter and document the current state for my report. But you stay on the platform level, don't go near the center mechanism. And if you hear anything cracking or shifting, you get out immediately." "Understood." "Thank you," Catherine said, meaning it. Martinez pulled waders from his truck and handed them to Catherine. "Water's only about 3 feet deep on the approach side. Should be safe enough if you move carefully." Catherine put Lily on her back, the child's arms wrapping around her mother's neck with trust Catherine didn't deserve. She stepped into the water, feeling mud suck at her boots with each step. The waders kept her dry, but the weight of water resistance made progress slow. The carousel platform emerged from the pond like a stage set abandoned mid-performance. Catherine climbed onto rotting wood that groaned under their combined weight, setting Lily down carefully on what looked like the most stable section. Up close, the decay was worse than Catherine had imagined. The roof had collapsed entirely on the eastern side, exposing the mechanical works to years of rain. The center pole that should have connected to the drive mechanism tilted at a dangerous angle. Most of the horses had broken free from their support rods, lying scattered across the platform or half submerged in water below. But even in ruin, beauty persisted. The horses that remained upright showed carving so detailed Catherine could see individual feathers on their wings, scales on their saddle decorations, expressions that seemed to hold emotion beyond what paint and wood should convey. Lily moved toward the nearest horse, a white stallion with a golden mane. "Mom, look at this one. It's beautiful." "Be careful, baby. The wood might not be." Lily's hand touched the horse's mane, and something inside the creature chimed. Not a bell, but a complex melody, 3 notes that hung in the air like the memory of music. Catherine froze. "Did you hear that?" It played music. Lily's face transformed with wonder. "Touch it again." Catherine reached out carefully, pressing her palm against the horse's neck. The same 3 notes sounded, but this time Catherine recognized them. Claire de Lune. The Debussy piece her grandmother had played on piano, the only clear memory Catherine retained from childhood visits to Margaret's house, before Catherine's mother had moved them away and contact had ceased. Why does the horse play music? I don't know. Catherine moved to the next horse, a black mare with silver trappings. When she touched its flank, different notes emerged, part of the same melody, but a different sequence. The third horse contributed another fragment. She went systematically around the platform, touching each of the 12 visible horses, and gradually a pattern emerged. Each horse played 3 to 4 notes from Clair de Lune. Together, they formed perhaps 30 seconds of the piece, but not in order. The horses would need to be touched in a specific sequence to play the melody correctly. "It's a puzzle," Catherine whispered. "The horses are a musical puzzle." Lily had already figured it out, her 7-year-old mind making connections Catherine's tired brain struggled to process. "We have to touch them in the right order, like when you put numbers in a row." "But how do we know which order?" Martinez called from the shore. 5 minutes, folks. Storm's coming in fast." Catherine looked up to see dark clouds rolling across the sky with the kind of speed that suggested Montana's November weather was about to remind them why people who lived here learned to respect the forecast. She started to guide Lily back toward the platform's edge, ready to return ashore before the situation became dangerous. But Lily had gone still, staring at something on the horse she'd first touched. "Mom, there's writing here." Catherine turned back. Sure enough, carved into the horse's base in letters so small they'd been nearly invisible until Lily's young eyes caught them, was a number, 1. They moved quickly now, checking each horse. Every one bore a number carved into its base, ranging from 1 to 12. Catherine touched them in sequence, and Clair de Lune played in its proper order, notes cascading across the ruined carousel with clarity that shouldn't have been possible from mechanisms exposed to decades of weather. When the final note faded, something deep within the carousel's center clicked. The sound was mechanical, precise, and entirely out of place in a structure that should have been too damaged to produce anything except the groan of settling wood. "What was that?" Lily's voice held more excitement than fear. "I don't know, but we need to leave," Mr. Martinez said. Thunder cracked overhead, and rain began falling in sheets. Martinez appeared at the platform's edge, climbing up with surprising agility for his age. "Storm's here. We need to get off this structure before lightning." The second click came from below the platform, followed by the sound of something releasing. A section of the floor beneath the center pole shifted, dropping inward by perhaps 6 inches. Martinez's expression went from concerned to alarmed. "Everyone off now. The platform's compromised." But Catherine was staring at the shifted section. Through the gap created by the dropped floor, she could see something that made no sense in the context of a ruined amusement park carousel. Metal glinted below, clean and unmarked by corrosion, reflecting light in a way that suggested modern construction rather than century-old mechanics. "Mr. Martinez, look at that. Does that look like it should be there?" The inspector followed her gaze, and his expression shifted through confusion to sharp professional interest. "That's not original carousel machinery. That's modern steel, sealed compartment construction. Someone installed that recently, probably within the last 15 years. The rain intensified, turning the platform into a slick hazard. Martinez made a command decision. We document this and come back with proper equipment. Everyone off, carefully and slowly." They retreated to shore, soaked through and shivering. Martinez's truck provided shelter while he called someone on his radio, using technical language Catherine couldn't quite follow. When he finished, he turned to her with an expression that combined curiosity and something that might have been respect. "Mrs. Wells, Mississippi, and it's Catherine. Catherine, your grandmother installed something in that carousel's center mechanism, something that triggered when you played the musical sequence. I need to bring in a structural engineer and probably law enforcement to document whatever's down there before we can safely access it." "Law enforcement? Why?" "Because people don't hide things in sealed compartments unless those things matter. Could be her will, could be family documents, could be anything. But it needs to be opened properly, with witnesses, to protect your rights as owner and document whatever's found." Catherine felt dread settling in her stomach like stones. "How long will that take?" "Few days, maybe a week. I'll fast-track the paperwork, but these things have procedures." Lily sneezed, a small sound that reminded Catherine they were both soaked through and she couldn't afford a doctor visit if either of them got sick. We should go. Martinez pulled a business card from his wallet. My cell number's on there. I'll call you when we're ready to open whatever's down there. In the meantime, don't come back alone. If you triggered that mechanism, someone might have noticed. Your grandmother was paranoid about security on this property for years. There might be reasons for that. The drive back to the motel took 40 minutes through rain that turned Highway 89 into a streaming mess of poor visibility and hydroplaning risks. Lily fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted by excitement and the adrenaline crash that followed. Catherine's mind spun through implications she couldn't quite grasp. Her grandmother had hidden something, had installed it recently enough that modern materials were involved, had created an elaborate musical puzzle using a ruined carousel that Catherine had inherited for $850. The carousel she couldn't afford to keep, couldn't afford to demolish, and now couldn't access without county supervision. Their motel room smelled of mildew and the previous occupant's cigarette smoke. Catherine had paid for another week, but after that, she had no plan except hope that something would change before they ran out of options entirely. She tucked Lily into the sagging bed, the child still damp despite Catherine's best efforts with the threadbare towels the motel provided. Tomorrow she needed to find a laundromat, needed to call her boss at the diner and see if there were extra shifts available, needed to figure out how to explain to Lily that the magical carousel was going to be demolished and whatever hope had flickered today would die with it. Catherine's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Robert Martinez. Got your number from the transfer paperwork. Call came in from county sheriff. Someone tried to access your property tonight. Triggered the motion sensors we installed after your grandmother's death. Might be nothing, might be something. Thought you should know. Catherine's hands started shaking. Someone had been at the carousel. Someone who knew there was something worth finding. Someone who'd moved fast enough after her visit that they must have been watching. She texted back, "Thank you for telling me. What should I do?" The response came quickly. "Stay away from the property until we sort this out. I'm pushing through the paperwork for emergency access. Should have authorization by tomorrow afternoon. We'll call you." Catherine set the phone down and moved to the window, looking out at the parking lot where her failing Honda sat between two trucks that looked like they belonged to men who worked with their hands and made enough money to maintain their vehicles. Everything she owned could fit in that car's trunk. Everything Lily had could fit in a single backpack. And somewhere, submerged in a pond behind a ruined amusement park, her grandmother had hidden something valuable enough that strangers came looking in the rain. Sleep didn't come easily. Catherine drifted through nightmares where carousels played discordant music, and Lily reached for painted horses that crumbled at her touch. She woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of Lily coughing, a wet sound that meant yesterday's soaking was already manifesting consequences Catherine couldn't afford. Morning brought gray light, and the cough had worsened. Catherine gave Lily the last of the children's cold medicine, the bottle barely holding a dose, and added pharmacy to the list of places she needed to visit with money she didn't have. "How are you feeling, baby?" "My chest hurts." Lily's voice came raspy and small. Catherine pressed her hand to Lily's forehead. "Warm, but not quite feverish. Yet, I need to go to work for a few hours. Mrs. Patterson next door said she'd check on you. I'll be back by noon. Can we go see the carousel again?" "Not today. Soon, though. Mr. Martinez has to do some paperwork first." The diner smelled of coffee and grease and the particular desperation of working people trying to fuel themselves for shifts that paid too little and demanded too much. Catherine tied on her apron and moved through familiar choreography, taking orders, delivering food, refilling coffee cups, smiling through exhaustion. Her boss, Rita, was a woman in her 50s who'd owned the diner for 20 years and ruled it with efficiency that bordered on compassion when circumstances allowed. She caught Catherine during a lull, voice low enough not to carry to customers. "You look worse than usual, and that's saying something. What's going on?" Catherine almost lied, then decided the truth was too heavy to carry alone. "My grandmother left me a carousel. It's half underwater, probably has to be demolished, and apparently there's something hidden inside that people are trying to steal." Rita processed this with the practiced calm of someone who'd heard many strange stories behind this counter. The old Sunken Carousel at Riverside Park. You know about it? Honey, everyone over 50 in this county knows about it. That carousel was legendary before it closed. Most beautiful ride in 3 states. Drew people from Idaho and Wyoming just to see it. Your grandmother ran it for 40 years before the park went under. Why did the park close? Rita's expression shifted to something that might have been caution. Depends who you ask. Official story was financial trouble. Couldn't compete with the new theme parks. Unofficial story. Your grandmother was involved in something that brought federal attention. Never proven, never charged, but the carousel closed overnight and she never explained why. People have been curious about that property ever since. Catherine felt ice forming in her stomach. What kind of federal attention? No idea. But Margaret Chun was more than she seemed. That woman had money, real money, back before she bought the park. Where it came from, nobody knew. She showed up in 1975 with cash to buy property outright and never worked a day beyond running that carousel. People talk. The bell above the door chimed. Robert Martinez entered, his expression urgent enough that several customers turned to look. He spotted Catherine and moved directly to her station. We need to talk. Now, if possible. Rita made the decision for her. Take your break. 15 minutes. They sat in Martinez's truck in the parking lot, rain drumming on the roof. He pulled out a tablet, showing Catherine photographs that made her breath catch. Structural engineer went out this morning with county sheriff. We documented the hidden compartment before attempting access. Catherine, your grandmother built something extraordinary. This isn't just a hidden safe. This is a vault. Military-grade construction, climate-controlled, sealed systems. Whatever's inside has been protected with technology that costs serious money. The photographs showed metalwork that looked more appropriate for a bank than an amusement park. Precision welds, sealed joints, electronic components visible through the gap. Can you open it? That's the thing. The mechanism that triggered yesterday only unlocked the first seal. There are 3 more. Each one requires a different sequence. And, Catherine, there's writing visible on the second seal. Your grandmother left a message. Martinez zoomed in on one photograph. Engraved letters, precise and deliberate. Only my blood opens this. Only Catherine's daughter plays the song. Catherine's voice came out strangled. She knew. She knew about Lily. Your grandmother died 6 months ago. Your daughter's 7. Margaret had been preparing this for years, maybe decades. This wasn't accident or coincidence. She engineered everything, including getting the property transferred to you for an amount you could barely afford. But why? What could possibly be worth all this? Martinez's expression held something between sympathy and warning. That's what we're going to find out. But Catherine, I need you to understand something. Whatever's down there, people already know it exists. The motion sensors caught 3 separate attempts to access the property last night. Professional attempts, not teenagers vandalizing. Someone with resources is very interested in what your grandmother left you. I don't understand any of this. I barely knew her. Why would she leave me something valuable? Maybe because you're the only family she had left? Maybe because she trusted you with something she couldn't trust anyone else with? I don't know. But we're opening that vault this afternoon with full documentation, and you need to be there. Catherine thought of Lily, coughing in a motel room, of the $93 in her account, of the check engine light that wouldn't go away and the winter coat they couldn't afford. She thought of her grandmother, a woman she'd met perhaps a dozen times across her entire childhood, a figure more legend than relative. What time? 2 o'clock. Bring your daughter. The inscription says she needs to play the song again, probably to trigger the next seal. She's sick. Yesterday's rain. I'll have medical standing by. County's taking this seriously now. Whatever's in that vault, it's protected by systems that cost more than most people make in years. Your grandmother wanted it found, but only by the right people. Catherine returned to work in a daze, moving through routine while her mind spun through impossibilities. Rita let her go early, reading the situation with practiced perception. Go take care of your kid and your weird inheritance. But Catherine, be careful. Money does strange things to people, and if there's money involved here, you need to protect yourself and that little girl. The motel room felt smaller than ever. Lily lay on the bed. Mr. Buttons clutched her chest, watching cartoons with the sound turned low. Catherine sat beside her, running fingers through her daughter's hair. "We're going back to the carousel this afternoon. Mr. Martinez needs you to play the song again." Lily's eyes brightened despite obvious discomfort. "Really? Will it make more music?" "I think so. But baby, I need you to know something. Whatever happens today, whatever we find, you're the most important thing in my life. The only important thing." Okay, Mommy. Are we going to be rich?" The question came with such innocent hope that Catherine felt tears threaten. "I don't know what we're going to be, but we're going to face it together." At 1:30, Martinez texted that he was outside. They emerged to find not just his truck, but a county sheriff's vehicle and an unmarked sedan that screamed federal authority. A woman in her 40s stepped out of the sedan, credentials already visible. "Miss Wells? I'm Special Agent Sarah Reeves, FBI. We need to discuss your grandmother's activities before we proceed with opening her vault." Catherine's first instinct was to grab Lily and run. Federal agents meant trouble, meant questions she couldn't answer, meant complications in a life already drowning in them. But Martinez's hand on her shoulder was gentle, grounding. "It's okay. Agent Reeves is here to help document whatever we find. Your grandmother's activities weren't criminal, but they were unusual enough to warrant federal interest." Agent Reeves softened her approach, seeming to recognize the panic in Catherine's eyes. "Miss Wells, you're not in any trouble, but your grandmother, Margaret Shun, was a person of interest in several investigations spanning 40 years. Not as a suspect, but as someone with information about significant financial movements. We'd like to understand what she left behind. I don't know anything about my grandmother's finances. I didn't even know she died until I got the letter about the carousel. That's what we're here to find out." Reeves gestured toward the vehicles. "Shall we?" The convoy to Riverside Park felt surreal. Catherine sat in Martinez's truck with Lily pressed against her side, watching the sheriff's car lead and the FBI sedan follow. 3 vehicles for one ruined carousel and a child who could barely stop coughing long enough to ask questions. "Mommy, why are there so many people?" "Because Grandma Margaret made something very special, and they want to see what it is." "Are we in trouble?" Catherine pulled Lily closer, kissing the top of her head. "No, baby, we're not in trouble. They're just being careful." The carousel looked even more desolate in the gray afternoon light. The pond's surface rippled with rain, and the structure itself seemed to sag further, as if the weight of attention was too much for its compromised frame to bear. But Catherine noticed something new. Portable lights had been set up around the perimeter, and a small crane sat positioned near the shore. Its boom extended toward the carousel's center. Martinez noticed her attention. "Structural engineer determined we can't safely access the vault from the platform level. Too much weight would risk total collapse. We're going to lower someone down through the opening we created, extract whatever's inside, then bring it to shore for documentation." "Who's going down?" "Me, if you'll permit it. I'm certified for confined space entry, and I've got the smallest frame of anyone qualified." He gestured to a younger man in climbing gear. "That's Danny Chun, by the way. Your second cousin, though I doubt you've met." Catherine stared at the man who'd been securing ropes to the crane. He had Margaret's eyes, that particular dark brown that seemed to hold secrets. "I didn't know I had family here." Danny approached, his smile tentative but genuine. "Aunt Margaret kept us separated for reasons she never explained. I grew up in Billings, heard stories about the legendary carousel, but never saw it until after she died. When Mr. Martinez put out the call for someone who knew confined space work and had family connection to verify documentation integrity, I volunteered. You know what's down there?" "No idea. But Aunt Margaret used to tell me stories when I was little, before whatever happened that made her cut off contact. She'd say the carousel held the memory of everything she'd ever loved and lost." I thought she meant metaphorically. Turns out maybe she was being literal. Agent Reeves joined them, tablet in hand, showing documents Catherine couldn't read from this distance. "Miss Wells, before we proceed, I need to inform you of what we know about your grandmother's history. You have the right to refuse to open the vault, But given the federal interest and the attempts to breach the property, I'd strongly advise cooperation. What history? Reeves pulled up a photograph. Margaret Chun, perhaps 40 years old, standing beside a man in military uniform. The photo quality suggested the 1980s. Your grandmother was married to Colonel James Chun, U.S. Army Intelligence. He died in 1984 under classified circumstances. Shortly after, your grandmother came into possession of assets that raised questions she never answered. She bought this property, built the carousel, and lived quietly for 40 years. But the money trail suggests she was protecting something her husband left behind. Catherine felt the ground shift beneath her feet. My grandfather was in intelligence, and likely involved in operations that remain classified. When he died, certain items went missing from secure facilities. Nothing was ever proven, but your grandmother's sudden wealth and her husband's access created suspicion that never quite resolved. So you think there's stolen government property in that carousel? We think there might be documentation that explains where certain things went, or possibly the things themselves. Either way, opening this vault with proper witnesses protects you legally. If there's nothing illegal, you keep whatever's there. If there is something that belongs to the government, we work out an arrangement. But unofficial attempts to access it suggest private parties also believe something valuable is hidden here. Martinez added, 3 different groups tried to breach the property last night. One set off motion sensors on the north side. Another cut through the old fence on the east. The third actually made it onto the platform before sheriff's deputies arrived, and they fled. Catherine, this is bigger than a family inheritance. We need to know what's down there before someone gets hurt trying to take it. Lily tugged on Catherine's sleeve, her small voice cutting through adult complications with child logic. Can I play the song now? I'm tired and I want to go home. Home. The motel room that smelled like cigarettes and disappointment. Catherine looked at her daughter, at the federal agent, at the cousin she'd never met, at the ruined carousel that had somehow become the center of something she didn't understand. Okay, let's open it. Getting Lily to the carousel required waiters for Catherine and a safety harness for both of them. Danny Chun secured the lines while Martinez supervised, ensuring every step was documented by the cameras Agent Reeves had positioned around the site. The sheriff's deputies maintained perimeter security, their presence more ominous than reassuring. The platform felt even more unstable than yesterday. Catherine held Lily close as they approached the first horse, the white stallion with the golden mane. Rain had washed away some of the grime, revealing details Catherine hadn't noticed before. Tiny inscriptions along the saddle's edge, dates perhaps, or coordinates she couldn't quite read in the fading light. Touch them and order baby, just like yesterday. Lily moved from horse to horse, her small hand pressing against weathered wood. Each touch produced those crystalline notes, clair de lune, building across the ruined platform with impossible clarity. Catherine realized the sound wasn't coming from the horses themselves, but from below, from whatever mechanism her grandmother had installed in the vault. When Lily touched the 12th horse, the final notes of the melody hung in the air for a long moment before fading. Then came the mechanical response. 3 distinct clicks, deeper than yesterday's 2, suggesting additional seals releasing. The platform shuddered. Catherine grabbed Lily, ready to flee, but Martinez's voice came calm through the radio, clipped to her belt. It's okay. That's just the vault systems activating. Structures holding. You're safe. Danny Chun was already descending through the opening, his climbing gear secured to the crane's cable. He wore a camera mounted to his helmet, feeding live footage to monitors on shore where Agent Reeves and the others watched. Catherine and Lily made their way back to dry land, shivering and anxious. The monitors showed Danny's descent into darkness, punctuated by LED lights he'd attached to his harness. The vault revealed itself in stages, smooth metal walls, climate control vents, and finally, a chamber perhaps 8 feet square. In the center sat a metal case, industrial grade, marked with stenciled letters Catherine could just make out on the screen. J. Chun classified. I see the case. Danny's voice came through radio static. It's secured to a pedestal. Looks like Wait, there's another inscription. Same handwriting as the message about Catherine's daughter. Read it, Agent Reeves commanded. Danny's voice carried clear through the radio. It says, "To my granddaughter Catherine and her daughter Lily. The carousel plays the song I sang to you when you were small, though you won't remember. Inside this case is the truth your grandfather died protecting. It's worth more than money, more than safety. It's worth the future he believed in. Guard it carefully. Trust no one who claims authority without proving love." Margaret Shun, October 2023. Catherine's breath caught. October 2023. 5 months before Margaret died. Her grandmother had written this recently, had known exactly who would open it and why. In the song, Catherine did remember, distantly, being very small and her grandmother singing something in French while rocking her to sleep. Claire de Lune wasn't just a song. It was a memory Margaret had embedded in metal and wood, waiting for Catherine to recognize it. "Can you extract the case?" Agent Reeves asked. "It's secured but not locked. Give me a minute." The monitors showed Danny working with tools, carefully disconnecting whatever mechanism held the case to its pedestal. Minutes stretched while rain intensified and wind picked up, making the carousel groan with sounds that suggested imminent structural failure. "Got it. Bringing it up now." The crane engaged, lifting Danny and his cargo slowly through the opening. Catherine watched the case emerge into gray daylight, water sluicing off its sealed surface. It measured perhaps 2 feet square, heavy enough that Danny struggled slightly even with the crane's assistance. They gathered in Martinez's truck, the largest vehicle, while rain hammered the roof. The case sat on a tarp between them, its presence commanding attention out of proportion to its size. Agent Reeves pulled on gloves before examining it closely. Military case, circa 1980s. Designed for document transport in hostile environments. The seals are intact, which means it hasn't been opened since it was placed in the vault. She looked at Catherine. "Miss Wells, as the legal owner of this property and its contents, you have the right to open this. But I'm obligated to inform you that if it contains classified materials, those materials remain government property regardless of how they came to be here. And if it doesn't contain classified materials, then it's yours to do with as you see fit." Lily had curled against Catherine's side, exhausted by the day and her worsening cough. Catherine stroked her daughter's hair, thinking about trust and authority and her grandmother's warning. Trust no one who claims authority without proving love. "Open it," Catherine said, "but document everything. I want copies of whatever's inside." Agent Reeves nodded to Danny, who'd proven himself as family and therefore trustworthy in ways the federal agent couldn't claim. He worked the case's latches, which released with sounds suggesting precision maintenance despite decades of storage. The lid lifted, revealing contents wrapped in protective fabric. Danny carefully removed the first layer, exposing documents sealed in plastic. Agent Reeves scanned them with professional speed, her expression shifting through surprise to something approaching alarm. "These are authentication certificates for Swiss bearer bonds. Issued 1983, matured 2003. She looked at Catherine. "Do you understand what bearer bonds are?" "Not really. They're financial instruments that belong to whoever physically holds them. No names, no registry. Just possession equals ownership. They were popular for moving money discreetly before governments cracked down. These particular bonds." She pulled up a calculator on her tablet, fingers moving quickly. "Face value of $50 million, matured at 6% annually for 20 years. Current value approximately $160 million. The number meant nothing. Catherine's brain couldn't process that many zeros, couldn't connect the concept of $160 million to the $93 in her checking account and the daughter who needed cold medicine. That's impossible. It's documented right here. But there's more. Agent Reeves lifted another bundle, this one containing what looked like technical drawings. These are schematics for a weapons system. Classified in 1984, still classified today. Your grandfather was apparently involved in its development before his death. Involved how? According to these notes, he discovered the program had been compromised. Foreign agents had accessed the designs. He stole these copies and the bonds, which were being used to pay the foreign agents, to prevent both from reaching enemy hands. Then he died, and your grandmother hid everything. Martinez spoke carefully. So Margaret Chun spent 40 years protecting stolen government secrets and stolen money. Stolen from thieves who stole it first. Agent Reeves corrected. This is complicated. The bonds were crime proceeds, technically belonging to no one legally. The documents were classified, but taken to prevent espionage. And Margaret never accessed either one. She just hid them and waited. Waited for what? Catherine asked. Agent Reeves pulled out a final document. This one a letter in Margaret's handwriting, dated 3 days before her death. She read aloud. To Catherine, if you're reading this, you found what James died protecting. The bonds were meant to buy weapons designs that would have killed thousands. James stopped the sale, but couldn't return the money without exposing operations that remain classified. He chose to hide both, hoping time would make them safe to reveal. I've spent 40 years keeping his secret, 40 years wondering if I was protecting something noble or just covering up a crime. But I believe James did the right thing. Those bonds sat and used while they matured, harm to no one. The weapons design stayed hidden, helping no one. Now they're yours. The bonds are legal to redeem, bearer instruments, no names attached. The design should go to the FBI. Let them sort out whether keeping secrets is worth more than truth. Use the money to give Lily what I couldn't give you. Choices. And forgive me for the distance. Keeping this secret meant keeping everyone away. Even you. Especially you. The truck went silent except for rain and Lily's labored breathing. Catherine felt tears on her face without remembering, starting to cry. Her grandmother hadn't been distant because of Catherine. She'd been distant to protect her. What happens now? Catherine's voice came out rough. Agent Reeves organized her thoughts visibly. The weapons designs go to the FBI for classification review. That's non-negotiable. The bonds, technically, they're proceeds from a criminal enterprise prevented by government action. The legal status is ambiguous enough that I'd recommend you retain a lawyer before attempting to redeem them. But Miss Wells, I'm not going to seize them. They sat in a vault for 40 years because your grandfather and grandmother chose to prevent harm rather than profit. That counts for something. How much is something? Enough that I'll testify on your behalf if ownership is challenged. You'll face tax implications. These have appreciated significantly, but the principal amount isn't criminal proceeds, it's crime prevention. There's a legal path forward, but it's not simple. Danny Chun had been quiet, processing everything. Aunt Margaret told me once that the carousel was her monument to Uncle James. I thought she meant metaphorically, but she literally buried his legacy inside it and waited for the right person to dig it up. Martinez added, the vault's climate control was powered by solar panels hidden in the carousel's decorative panels. I noticed them during inspection, but assumed they were vandalized equipment. Your grandmother maintained that vault for 40 years using renewable energy. Professional-grade security system, monitored remotely, all hidden inside a structure everyone assumed was abandoned. That's impressive. That's terrifying, Catherine corrected. She spent 40 years alone, protecting this, waiting for someone to find it. And it had to be me. It had to be Lily. She engineered everything. Agent Reeves started carefully packing the documents. Miss Wells, I need to take the technical materials into federal custody tonight. But the bonds and your grandmother's personal documents can stay with you. I'll need your signature acknowledging that classified materials were recovered and surrendered voluntarily. And then you figure out how to redeem $160 million worth of bearer bonds without getting robbed or arrested. I'd recommend contacting a financial attorney who specializes in unusual asset recovery. I can provide referrals. Lily stirred, her fever-warm face pressing against Catherine's arm. Did we find the treasure? Catherine looked at the case, at the documents that represented more money than she'd ever imagined, at the federal agent who held her future in bureaucratic hands, at the cousin she'd just met who'd descended into darkness to pull out her grandfather's secrets. Yeah, baby, we found it. Can we go home now? Home. Catherine had $93, a motel room paid through Friday, and apparently $160 million in bonds she couldn't legally touch without lawyers she couldn't afford to hire. The irony wasn't lost on her. Soon, sweetheart, very soon, the attorney's office occupied the third floor of a building in downtown Billings that suggested old money and established reputation. Catherine sat in a leather chair that probably cost more than her monthly income, Lily beside her clutching Mr. Buttons and trying not to cough on the expensive carpet. Marcus Webb had agreed to see them based on Agent Reeves's referral, though his initial skepticism had been obvious when Catherine called. People claiming to possess $160 million in bearer bonds typically fell into categories involving fraud, delusion, or both. But the FBI agent's endorsement and the authenticated documents Catherine had brought changed his expression within the first 5 minutes. "This is extraordinary," Webb said for the third time, examining the certificates through magnifying glasses that made his eyes appear unnaturally large. "Swiss bearer bonds, properly matured, authentication marks genuine. Miss Wells, do you understand how rare these are?" "I understand they're worth a lot of money I can't access." "Can't access yet," Webb corrected. "The redemption process is complex but not impossible. However, we need to address several issues before proceeding." He ticked off points on fingers that bore a wedding ring probably worth more than Catherine's car. First, tax implications. The IRS will treat redemption as taxable income. At $160 million, you're looking at approximately $60 million in federal and state taxes. The number made Catherine's head spin. That's more money than I can imagine losing. It's also less than you'll have remaining. Second issue, proving legitimate ownership. Your grandmother's letter helps, but we'll need to establish clear chain of custody. The fact that the FBI recovered them from your property and chose not to seize them is strongly in your favor. Third issue, and most immediate, you need protection. Protection from what? Webb's expression turned grave. "Miss Wells, you're currently the only person outside law enforcement who knows the location of instruments worth $160 million that require no identification to redeem. The attempts to breach your property will intensify once word spreads that something was recovered. You need security, discreet financial management, and absolute silence about the bond's existence until we've completed the redemption process. I can't afford security. I can barely afford your consultation fee. My consultation is pro bono, courtesy of Agent Reeves pulling in a favor I owed her. As for security, I have contacts who specialize in protecting high-value assets during vulnerable transitions. They work on contingency, paid from the redemption when it completes." Catherine looked at Lily, who'd fallen asleep despite the office's unfamiliar environment, exhausted by 3 days of worsening cold symptoms and the emotional weight of events she couldn't fully comprehend. "How long does redemption take?" 6 to 8 weeks if everything proceeds smoothly. The bonds need to be authenticated by the Swiss issuing bank, which requires physical transport to Zurich. Then there's documentation review, tax withholding coordination, fund transfer arrangements. It's a process designed to be deliberately slow to prevent fraud. And during those 6 to 8 weeks, you'll need somewhere safe to stay. Not the motel you're currently occupying. That's the first place anyone looking for you would check. My firm maintains a secured apartment for clients in witness protection scenarios. It's available. The phrase witness protection sent ice through Catherine's veins. "I'm not in danger, am I?" Agent Reeves said the bonds weren't stolen. They weren't stolen from legal owners. But Miss Wells, 3 separate groups try to access your grandmother's vault before you opened it. Those groups now know something valuable was recovered. They don't know what, but they'll be making inquiries. The local sheriff, the FBI presence, the crane equipment, all of it signals something significant happened. We need to get ahead of speculation before it becomes action. Lily woke with a coughing fit that racked her small body. Catherine held her, feeling the heat radiating through the child's thin jacket. The fever had worsened despite the children's Tylenol Catherine had bought with her last $20. Webb noticed immediately. "Your daughter needs medical attention." "I know. I'm taking her to urgent care after this." "No, she needs attention now. My wife's a pediatrician. Her office is 2 floors down. Webb was already picking up his phone. Sarah? Marcus. I'm sending a client's daughter down. 7 years old, productive cough, fever. Yes, I know you're booked. This is important. Thank you. He looked at Catherine with an expression that combined professional distance and unexpected compassion. Take her down. Dr. Webb will see her immediately. I'll start drafting the documentation for bond redemption. When you're done, come back up and we'll discuss next steps. The pediatrician's office radiated child-friendly warmth that the lawyer's space lacked. Dr. Sarah Webb examined Lily with gentle efficiency, asking questions Catherine answered while trying. Not to reveal how long she'd known about the cough, how many days she delayed seeking treatment, because urgent care cost $150 she didn't have. She has bronchitis, early stage, but advancing, Dr. Webb said, writing prescriptions with quick strokes. These antibiotics will clear the infection if started immediately. I'm also prescribing a nebulizer treatment. You'll need to do breathing therapy twice daily for the next week. How much does a nebulizer cost? Dr. Webb paused, really looking at Catherine for the first time. The unit itself is about $60. But Miss Wells, my husband mentioned your client. This goes on his firm's account. Medical care for clients' families is covered during legal proceedings. Catherine wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could pay eventually, wanted to maintain some dignity in the face of charity she desperately needed. But Lily's labored breathing made pride a luxury she couldn't afford. Thank you. No thanks necessary. But Catherine, may I call you Catherine? You look exhausted. When's the last time you slept properly? I don't remember. When this is over, when your legal situation resolves, I want you to schedule a full physical. You're running on empty, and you can't take care of your daughter if you collapse. Back in Marcus Webb's office, Catherine found he drafted a document stacked 2 inches thick. He walked her through the essentials. Power of attorney allowing him to act on her behalf with the Swiss bank, tax withholding agreements with the IRS, confidentiality clauses binding everyone involved in the redemption process. I've also contacted the security firm I mentioned. They're sending someone to meet us at the secured apartment. You'll move there tonight, along with whatever belongings you can't afford to leave at the motel. Everything I own fits in my car trunk. That makes the transition easier. The apartment is furnished, utilities included, groceries stocked. You'll have a secure vehicle for essential errands, driver provided. The security team will maintain a discreet presence, but you'll have privacy within the apartment. Catherine signed documents without fully comprehending their implications, her mind struggling to process that morning's reality of $93 in eviction notices transforming into afternoon's reality of lawyers and security details and $160 million pending. What about the carousel? Webb looked up from organizing paperwork. What about it? It's still my property. Half-submerged, condemned, probably going to collapse in the next storm. The county said I have 6 months to remove it or face fines. I still can't afford demolition. When the bonds redeem, you'll be able to afford whatever you want. In the meantime, I'll file for a 6-month extension citing extraordinary circumstances and ongoing federal investigation. That should satisfy the county, but I don't want to demolish it. The words surprised Catherine even as she spoke them. The carousel had brought nothing but complications. Hidden vaults, federal agents, strangers trying to breach security. But it had also brought answers about her grandmother, about her grandfather's sacrifice, about a love story that had shaped her family's trajectory across 40 years. Webb studied her with an attorney's assessment of client psychology. You want to restore it. My grandmother spent 40 years maintaining it, protecting what was inside. Now that we've taken what she protected, just destroying the carousel feels like erasing her. Like saying none of it mattered. Restoration would cost significantly more than demolition. You're looking at perhaps $2 million for proper structural repair, another $1 million for mechanical restoration, environmental remediation for the pond. And the property would need to be secured during construction to prevent further breach attempts. When I have $100 million after taxes, I can afford $3 million for my grandmother's monument. Webb smiled, the first genuine expression Catherine had seen from him. When you have $100 million, Miss Wells, you can afford many things. Let's focus on getting you there safely first. The secured apartment occupied the top floor of a residential building with controlled access and sight lines that suggested someone had designed security into the architecture rather than adding it as afterthought. Catherine and Lily arrived after dark, escorted by a man who introduced himself simply as James, and whose military bearing reminded Catherine painfully of how her grandmother's letters had described Colonel Chun. James swept the apartment before allowing them inside, checking rooms with practiced efficiency. All clear. Kitchen stocked for 2 weeks. Landline works, cell service is good. Security monitors here, he indicated a small panel by the door, show all building entrances. And the parking garage. You see anything unusual, you call this number. He handed Catherine a card with a single phone number printed on it. Day or night, someone answers within 2 rings. How long do we stay here? Until Mr. Webb completes the bond redemption. Could be 6 weeks, could be 10. Depends on Swiss banking speed and IRS processing. You're safe here, Miss Wells. Buildings owned by a security firm. Residents are all protected clients or employees. No one gets past the lobby without authorization. After James left, Catherine explored the apartment with Lily trailing behind. 2 bedrooms, both larger than their entire motel room. A kitchen with appliances that looked new and a refrigerator stocked with actual food, fresh vegetables, milk that didn't smell questionable, bread without mold. A bathroom with water pressure that didn't fluctuate and towels that felt soft instead of scratchy. Lily discovered the second bedroom and gasped. Mommy, there's a bed. A real bed. The room had been prepared for a child. Twin bed with a princess comforter, shelves holding new books, a desk with art supplies still in packaging. Catherine felt tears threatening again. In 48 hours, she'd gone from contemplating which bills to ignore to living in an apartment where strangers had bought her daughter a princess bed. Do you like it, baby? It's the prettiest room I've ever had. Lily climbed onto the bed, testing its softness, then looked at Catherine with 7-year-old seriousness. Is this because of Grandma Margaret's treasure? Yes. This is because your great-grandma kept something safe for a very long time, and now we're going to use it to make sure you have the things you need. Like a real bed? Like a real bed, and medicine when you're sick, and winter coats that fit, and everything else. Lily processed this, then asked the question Catherine had been dreading. Are we going to be rich like the people on TV? Catherine sat on the bed beside her daughter, choosing words carefully. We're going to have enough money that you never have to worry about being hungry or cold or not having medicine. But baby, the money doesn't make us different people. We're still us. We just won't be scared all the time anymore. I like being scared with you better than being not scared without you. The statement hit Catherine like a physical blow. All the times she'd worked double shifts, all the nights Lily had stayed with cheap babysitters or slept in the diner's back booth while Catherine finished closing duties, all the moments Catherine had chosen survival over presence. Lily remembered. And somehow, through all of it, the child had preferred Catherine's struggling company to anyone's comfortable absence. You're never going to be without me. I promise. They spent the evening establishing routines in their temporary home. Catherine administered Lily's nebulizer treatment, watching her daughter breathe medicated mist while reading one of the new books. They ate dinner from groceries Catherine didn't have to count pennies to afford. They bathed in a tub that filled with hot water without running out halfway through. And Catherine tried to ignore the security monitors showing cameras that tracked every person entering or leaving the building. Evidence that their safety required constant surveillance precisely because the money promised to change everything. Sleep came easier in the apartment's quiet. No traffic noise, no neighbors arguing through thin walls, no worry about whether the door lock would hold if someone tried to force entry. But Catherine's dreams filled with carousels spinning through dark water, painted horses reaching towards something she couldn't see, and her grandmother's voice singing Clair de Lune, in French words Catherine had forgotten she knew. She woke at 3 a.m. to find Lily standing by the window, backlit by city lights, looking small and lost despite the princess bed and the security and the promise of $100 million. Can't sleep, baby. I had a bad dream about the carousel sinking all the way down and nobody finding it. Catherine joined her daughter at the window, both of them looking out at buildings spread below. The carousel's not going to sink. Mr. Webb is getting us more time to decide what to do with it. But what if people try to break it while we're gone? What if they break the horses? Why do the horses matter? Lily's answer came with the clarity children sometimes achieve when adults are too tired to filter perception. Because the horses played Grandma's song. They're how she said she loved you even when she couldn't be close. If the horses break, it's like the love breaks too. Catherine pulled Lily close, feeling the truth in what her daughter had articulated. The carousel wasn't just property or Margaret's monument or a vault delivery system. It was a message encoded in music and mechanics and years of isolated maintenance. It was Margaret saying, "I loved you," in the only way her circumstances allowed. Then we'll protect the horses. We'll restore the whole thing, make it beautiful again. And maybe we'll even make it play for other people so they can hear Grandma's song, too. Can we visit it tomorrow? We'll have to ask Mr. Webb and James. But yes, I think we should see it. Make sure it's okay. Morning brought a call from Marcus Webb with news that managed to be simultaneously promising and alarming. The Swiss bank has confirmed authentication of the bonds. Their value, as stated, is accurate. However, Miss Wells, they've flagged unusual interest in your account. Catherine's stomach dropped. What kind of interest? 3 separate inquiries in the past 24 hours, all from parties claiming to represent legitimate business interests in bearer bond redemption. The bank shut them down. Proper protocols require your direct authorization for any information disclosure. But someone is actively trying to insert themselves into this transaction. Who? Unknown. The inquiries came through different channels, different law firms, different supposed business justifications. But their timing suggests coordination. Someone knows you have the bonds and is attempting to establish legal position before redemption completes. Can they stop it? Not if we move quickly. I'm accelerating the process, calling in favors at the IRS to fast-track the tax withholding agreements. If we can complete redemption within 3 weeks instead of 6, we minimize the window for legal challenges. What should I do? Stay in the apartment. Don't discuss the bonds with anyone outside our established circle. And Catherine, I need to ask something sensitive. Is there anyone from your past who might have known about your grandmother's activities? Anyone who might have been waiting for her death to make a move on whatever she'd hidden? Catherine thought about her childhood, about the few times she'd visited Margaret before her mother moved them away. There was a man who used to hang around the carousel. I remember because Grandma always sent me inside when he came near. She'd talk to him by the fence, and they'd argue. I was maybe 5 or 6. Do you remember anything about him? He had a tattoo on his forearm. Military insignia, I think, and Grandma called him David once. I remember because it was my dad's name, and I asked if they were related. She said no, that this David was someone who wanted things that didn't belong to him. Webb went quiet on the line. Miss Wells, I'm going to have Agent Reeves run that information. If this David knew your grandmother and is still alive, he might be connected to the current inquiries. I'll call you back. The line went dead, and Catherine stood in the apartment's kitchen holding a phone that connected her to lawyers and FBI agents and Swiss bankers, feeling more out of her depth than when she'd had $93 and only one problem: survival. Lily emerged from her bedroom, moving better after a night of rest and proper breathing treatment. Can we make pancakes? There's a mix in the cabinet. They cooked breakfast together, Catherine trying to focus on the simple domesticity of measuring flour and flipping pancakes, while her mind spun through implications of men named David and military tattoos and decades-old arguments about things that didn't belong to anyone. James arrived at 10 a.m. with news that Webb had authorized a visit to the carousel property, but only with full security escort. Vehicle leaves in 30 minutes. Bring your daughter if you want, but understand that we're going prepared for potential confrontation. Confrontation with who? Unknown parties who've shown interest in the property. County sheriffs doing drive-bys every 4 hours, but there's a lot of acreage and not enough deputies. We'll have 2 vehicles for personnel, clear sight lines maintained at all times. The convoy to Riverside Park felt like a military operation. James drove a black SUV with Catherine and Lily, while another vehicle followed with 3 additional security personnel whose names Catherine never learned. They communicated through radios using codes she didn't understand, maintaining spacing and checking intersections with precision, suggesting extensive training. Lily pressed her face to the window, watching the familiar landscape roll past. Why are there so many people coming with us? Because some people might want to take things that belong to us, and these folks are making sure that doesn't happen. Like the people who tried to break into the carousel before. Exactly like that. The property looked different under gray morning sky. The county had erected temporary fencing around the perimeter, and orange cones marked the path to the carousel. But what caught Catherine's attention was the second crane now positioned on the property. This one larger than what Martinez had used, with a boom extended fully toward the carousel center. James noticed a reaction. That wasn't authorized by county or your attorney. Someone's been here. He radioed the second vehicle, and personnel deployed with efficiency that confirmed Catherine's suspicion about their military backgrounds. They swept the property while James kept Catherine and Lily in the locked SUV, watching through tinted windows. 10 minutes later, one of the security team radioed back. James, you need to see this. Platform's been breached. Center mechanism is gone. Catherine's blood ran cold. The vault. Someone had gone into the vault and taken something. But they'd already removed the case, already secured the bonds and the documents. What else could have been there? James opened her door. Stay close. Don't touch anything. They approached the carousel carefully, Catherine holding Lily's hand tight enough to make the child wince. The platform showed fresh damage, boards pried up around the center pole, equipment marks suggesting the unauthorized crane had been used to extract something heavy. One of the security team pointed to gouges in the remaining platform. Whatever they took weighed enough to require industrial lifting equipment, more than a person could carry. James photographed everything, his radio active with communication Catherine couldn't follow. Finally, he turned to her. We need to leave. This is a crime scene now, and we've probably contaminated it just by being here. I'm calling county sheriff and your attorney. But what did they take? I don't know. But Miss Wells, someone knew exactly where to look and what equipment they'd need. This was planned, recent, and professional. Back at the apartment, Marcus Webb arrived within an hour, his expression grim. Sheriff's investigating, FBI's been notified, but Catherine, we have a serious problem. Agent Reeves reviewed the vault installation during your grandmother's lifetime. According to her records, the chamber contained a secondary compartment below the main case. A hidden safe that wouldn't have been visible during our initial recovery. What was in the secondary compartment? Your grandmother's personal notes mentioned insurance, her word. We assumed she meant the bonds and documents were insurance for her silence about classified operations. But what if she meant something else? What if there was additional material in that vault that she considered insurance against someone specific? Catherine thought about the man named David, about arguments at the fence line, about things that didn't belong to anyone. The person who broke into the vault, could they be the same person trying to stop the bond redemption? Possibly. Or they could be working for the same interests. Catherine, I need you to remember everything you can about your childhood visits to your grandmother. Any detail might matter. People she mentioned, places she talked about, anything unusual. Catherine closed her eyes, reaching back through years of deliberately not thinking about Margaret, about the grandmother who'd seemed to reject her family. But now, reframing those memories through the lens of a woman protecting dangerous secrets, details emerged different. She had a safe in her house. I remember because I asked what was inside, and she said, promises are made to people who can't break them anymore. I didn't understand then. Do you know if that safe still exists? I don't even know if her house still exists. After the carousel closed, after I stopped visiting, I lost track of her completely. Webb pulled up county records on his tablet. Margaret Chin owned a residence at 742 Riverside Road until her death. Property went to estate proceedings, hasn't been cleared for sale yet. It's technically still part of her estate, which means as her heir, you have legal right of access. You think whatever was in the vault came from her house safe? I think your grandmother created a nested security system. Important documents in the carousel vault, with the most sensitive material hidden even deeper. But backup copies or related items might exist at her residence. We should search it before whoever breached the vault tries the same thing there. James spoke up from where he'd been monitoring the security feeds. If we're going to search Chin's residence, we do it now, today, before word spreads about the vault breach. And we bring enough personnel to secure the property against intrusion. How many is enough? For a property that might contain $160 million worth of additional assets. 8 personnel minimum, 2 vehicles, drone surveillance, local law enforcement notification. This isn't a casual visit, Miss Wells. This is a recovery operation. Catherine looked at Lily, who'd been coloring at the kitchen table, trying to give the adults space for complicated discussions. Her daughter deserved a childhood that didn't involve security teams and vault breaches and men who took things that didn't belong to them. But Lily also deserved to understand her heritage, to know the grandmother who'd sacrificed connection for protection, who'd embedded love in music and mechanics and decades of isolated vigilance. Okay, we search the house, but Lily comes with us. I'm not leaving her here alone. She won't be alone. We have personnel who can. She comes with us, Catherine repeated, her voice carrying an edge that made James reassess. My grandmother protected something for 40 years. If there's more to find, Lily and I find it together. That's non-negotiable. Webb and James exchanged glances, then Webb nodded. Your property, your terms. But we do this carefully and by the book. If we find anything of value, it's documented immediately. No questions about legitimacy later. They assembled a team in under 2 hours. 8 security personnel, 2 attorneys from Webb's firm, Agent Reeves, who'd been notified of the vault breach and insisted on federal presence, and county sheriff's deputy to document that proper legal authorization existed for the property search. The convoy to Margaret's house felt like a military deployment. Catherine sat in the lead vehicle with Lily, watching the security team coordinate movements with radio efficiency. Her daughter had gone quiet, sensing the tension, holding Mr. Buttons close. Are we going to Grandma Margaret's house? Yes, baby. We need to see if she left anything there that explains what people are looking for. Is it more treasure? Maybe. Or maybe just answers about who she was and why she kept secrets. Margaret Chin's house sat on 2 acres at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by pines that provided privacy and probably explained why she'd chosen it. The structure itself was modest, single-story ranch style, built in the 1970s with practical attention to durability over aesthetics. Paint had faded, gutters showed rust, gardens had gone wild. All evidence of maintenance deferred after Margaret's death. The sheriff's deputy checked the property records one final time, then nodded authorization. Estate's still in legal limbo. No will beyond the Carousel property transfer. As the closest living relative, Miss Wells has standing to enter. But everything removed needs to be documented for eventual estate settlement. James and his team swept the property first, checking for signs of forced entry or recent disturbance. They found none, which either meant no one had tried to access the house or someone had been professional enough to hide their intrusion. Clear, but stay together and don't touch anything until attorneys photograph it. The house's interior felt frozen in time. Margaret's furniture remained arranged as though she might return any moment. Mail sat stacked on the kitchen table, forwarded from somewhere and never opened. Photographs lined the walls. Colonel James Chun in uniform, a younger Margaret smiling beside him. Strangers Catherine couldn't identify. But one photograph caught her attention. Margaret holding a child, perhaps 2 years old, with dark hair and serious eyes. The child was Catherine, she realized, though she had no memory of the moment. The way Margaret held her suggested fierce protectiveness, a grandmother clutching something precious and threatened. Lily pointed to the photograph. That's you, Mommy. You look like me. I suppose I do. They moved through the house systematically. Webb's team photographing each room before allowing the security personnel to search. The living room yielded nothing unusual. The bedroom contained clothes that would need to be donated and personal items that held emotional weight, but no obvious value. The study stopped everyone. Three walls of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves held volumes on cryptography, military history, intelligence operations, and weapons development. A desk dominated the center of the room, its surface covered in notes written in a mixture of English and what looked like Chinese characters. Agent Reeves studied the notes carefully. This is operational planning. Your grandmother was tracking something, maybe multiple things. Look, this column lists dates from the 1980s. This one has recent dates, as recent as 6 months before she died. Tracking what? People maybe, or financial movements. I can't tell without more context, but she was definitely monitoring something she considered important enough to maintain records for 40 years. Webb pointed to a locked drawer in the desk. Mr. James, can you open this without damaging it? James produced a small toolkit, working the lock with practiced efficiency. The drawer opened, revealing a single metal box, not a safe, but a document container designed for fire protection. Inside were papers organized with the same precision Margaret had applied to the Carousel vault. The first document was a birth certificate. Catherine Wells, born November 14, 1987. Mother Linda Chun Wells, father unknown. Catherine had always known her father wasn't named on her birth certificate, had grown up with her mother's vague explanations about a relationship that ended before Catherine was born. But the next document changed everything. A letter from Margaret to Linda Wells, dated December 1987. Linda, I know you're angry about James's death and the circumstances that followed. I know you blame his work for destroying our family. But Catherine is innocent of all that. She's James's legacy as much as the secrets I keep. I'm begging you to let me stay in her life, to let her know her grandfather's family, even if you want nothing to do with mine. The Carousel was James's favorite place. He designed the music system himself before his last deployment, before everything fell apart. He said if anything happened to him, I should make the Carousel sing Clair de Lune, because that was the song I sang to you when you were small, and he wanted that love to continue through generations. Don't take Catherine away because you're hurt. Let her know where she comes from, even if that knowledge is painful. The letter was stamped, returned to sender, and no longer at this address. Linda had moved, had cut contact completely, had ensured Catherine grew up knowing nothing about Margaret beyond fragments. Catherine felt tears streaming down her face, without remembering, starting to cry. Her mother had severed the connection deliberately, had deprived Catherine of her grandmother not because Margaret was distant, but because Linda was wounded and angry and punishing the wrong person. Lily tugged on her mother's sleeve. Mommy, why are you sad? Because Grandma Margaret wanted to know me, and my mom wouldn't let her. All those years, she wasn't staying away. She was being kept away. Webb carefully set the letter aside for documentation. This establishes emotional context, but we still need to find whatever Margaret was protecting. The safe she mentioned to you as a child, it has to be here somewhere. They searched for 2 hours, checking obvious locations and increasingly creative hiding spots. The house was small enough that a safe of any significant size should have been obvious, but they found nothing. Finally, Lily, who'd been wandering through the house with the boredom of children excluded from adult tasks, called from the kitchen. Mr. Webb, there's music coming from the floor. Everyone moved to the kitchen, where Lily stood by the refrigerator. Catherine listened carefully and heard it, faint but unmistakable, the 3-note sequence from Clair de Lune, playing on repeat at a volume barely above threshold of perception. It's like the Carousel, Lily said. The horses played music. Maybe the floor does, too. James knelt, pressing his ear to the linoleum. She's right. There's a mechanism under here, triggered by something. Probably proximity sensor based on the repetition pattern. They pulled back the old linoleum carefully, revealing floorboards that looked original to the house. But one section, approximately 3 feet square, showed seams that didn't match the surrounding board's grain pattern. The same technique Margaret had used in the Carousel platform. James lifted the section, and a steel staircase descended into darkness below the house. Battery-powered lights activated automatically as the panel opened fully, illuminating a basement Catherine hadn't known existed. Stay here, James instructed, then descended with 2 of his security team. Their radio chatter suggested initial confusion, then growing astonishment. Finally, James called up, "Mr. Webb, Agent Reeves, Miss Wells, you need to see this. The rest of you maintain perimeter security." Catherine went down the stairs holding Lily's hand, both of them stepping carefully into Margaret Chen's final secret. The basement was a vault, but not like the sealed chamber beneath the carousel. This was a working archive, climate-controlled and meticulously organized. Filing cabinets lined 3 walls. A desk held computer equipment that looked outdated but functional. And along the 4th wall, mounted in custom frames, were photographs, dozens of them, spanning decades. Agent Reeves moved to the photographs first, her professional composure cracking slightly. "These are surveillance photos. Look, this is Senator Morrison, circa 1985. This is General Hammond. This one, Jesus, this is Director Phillips from CIA Operations. Your grandmother was documenting something big." Webb examined the filing cabinets, which were unlocked and organized with labels suggesting accounting precision. "These are financial records, bank transfers, shell company documentation, payment verification." She tracked money movements for 40 years. Money movements connected to what? Agent Reeves pulled a file at random, scanning contents that made her expression darken. "Connected to the weapons program your grandfather exposed. He didn't just steal the designs and the bonds. He documented everyone involved in the espionage ring. And your grandmother spent 4 decades tracking what happened to them after the program was shut down." Catherine felt the weight of that revelation settle like stones. She was making sure they didn't do it again. More than that, look at these recent entries, some dated within weeks of her death. She was tracking descendants, business associates, new iterations of the same corruption. She built a database of everyone connected to the original crime and everyone they might recruit to commit new ones. Webb had moved to the computer, powering it on despite its age. The system booted slowly, requiring passwords that James bypassed with tools Catherine didn't recognize. When the desktop appeared, a single folder dominated. For Catherine, inside were video files, dozens of them, each dated and labeled. The most recent, dated 3 days before Margaret's death, was titled Final Message. Catherine opened it with shaking hands. Margaret Shun appeared on screen, looking frail but determined, seated at the desk in this very basement. Her voice came clear despite her obvious illness. "Catherine, if you're watching this, you found my life's work. 40 years of evidence against people who sold their country for profit and killed your grandfather when he tried to stop them. I couldn't report it while I was alive. They're too powerful, too connected, too willing to destroy anyone who threatens them. But I'm dying now, and the work needs to continue." The Carousel Vault held the original evidence from 1984. This basement holds everything that followed, proof that the corruption didn't end when James died. It evolved. The people involved retired into private sector, into think tanks, into positions where they could continue profiting from classified information. The bonds in the carousel were meant to buy you time to understand what you've inherited, time to decide whether to continue my work or let it die with me. But Catherine, if you choose to continue, know that these people will fight back. They've built careers and fortunes on the assumption that James's sacrifice was meaningless, that Margaret Shun would take her secrets to the grave. Prove them wrong. Use the money to protect yourself, but use the evidence to protect everyone else. Don't let your grandfather's death be for nothing. The video ended, and the basement fell silent except for the climate control system's quiet hum. Agent Reeves spoke first, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "This is prosecutable evidence for at least 30 cases spanning 4 decades. If half of what she documented holds up in court, we're looking at the biggest espionage prosecution in American history." "And the people involved?" Catherine asked. "Some are dead, some are retired, but some still hold positions of influence, corporate boards, consulting firms, government advisory roles. They have resources to fight this, and they have motivation to ensure it stays buried." Webb added practical concerns, which explains the vault breach. They're not after the bonds. Those are legitimate assets you can redeem. They're after this evidence, and they're scrambling to find it before it becomes public. James was already on his radio, calling for additional security. We need to extract these files immediately and get them into federal custody. Mr. Webb, how fast can you complete the bond redemption? If I push every contact and call in every favor, 2 weeks, maybe 10 days. Then that's our timeline. We secure the evidence, protect Miss Wells, and complete the financial transaction before opposition can organize. After that, Catherine has resources to protect herself and fight whatever legal challenges emerge. Catherine looked at Lily, who'd been examining the photographs with 7-year-old fascination, not fully understanding but sensing importance. Baby, do you understand what we found? Grandma Margaret was making sure bad people got caught. Yes, exactly that. And now we have to decide whether to help her finish that work. Lily considered this with unexpected seriousness. If we don't help, do the bad people get away? Probably. Then we have to help. Because Grandma Margaret and Great-Grandpa James didn't keep secrets this long, so bad people could win. Catherine pulled her daughter close, overwhelmed by the wisdom children sometimes achieve when adults are too compromised by fear to see clearly. Margaret had kept these secrets for 40 years, had lived in isolation and died alone, had sacrificed connection with her only granddaughter to protect evidence that might someday matter. That someday had arrived, and Catherine would be damned if she wasted the gift. Okay, we helped finish what they started. The extraction took 6 hours. James's security team worked with military precision, photographing every document, cataloging every file, creating redundant digital backups before physically removing materials from Margaret's basement vault. Agent Reeve coordinated with FBI evidence teams, ensuring chain of custody documentation that would hold up in court when, not if, the prosecutions began. Catherine watched them work, holding Lily, who'd fallen asleep against her shoulder, exhausted by the day's discoveries and the weight of history her 7-year-old mind couldn't fully process, but somehow understood mattered beyond ordinary measure. Marcus Webb pulled Catherine aside while the teams continued their methodical dismantling of 40-year surveillance. His expression carried the gravity of someone about to deliver news that would fundamentally alter his client's trajectory. Catherine, I need you to understand what you're inheriting. Not just the bonds. Those are straightforward wealth transfer. But this evidence, these files your grandmother compiled, they make you a target for people with significant resources and strong motivation to prevent disclosure. Agent Reeves said the FBI will protect the evidence once it's in federal custody. They'll protect the physical materials. But they can't protect you from civil litigation, from media attention, from private investigators and corporate lawyers, and every other mechanism powerful people employ to destroy credibility before evidence reaches trial. Your grandmother stayed anonymous for 40 years. You won't have that luxury. So what do I do? Webb pulled out his tablet, showing Catherine financial projections that made her head spin. The bonds will redeem at approximately $160 million. After taxes, you'll net roughly $100 million. I'm recommending we immediately place $20 million in a blind trust specifically designated for legal defense and security expenses. Another $30 million should go into diverse, low-risk investments, index funds, real estate, instruments that provide stable income regardless of what happens with the prosecution. That's $50 million for protection and investments. What about the other 50? That's yours to deploy as you see fit. But Catherine, I strongly advise caution. The people your grandmother documented spent decades building legitimate-appearing business empires on foundations of espionage profit. They'll argue their wealth is legal, that accusations of 40-year-old crimes are politically motivated harassment by a troubled veteran with mental health issues and a desperate financial situation. They'll attack me personally. They'll destroy you professionally, socially, and psychologically if they can. They'll hire investigators to find every mistake you've made, every moment of weakness, every decision that can be reframed as evidence of instability. They'll use your PTSD, your eviction history, your single motherhood, everything becomes ammunition. Catherine felt rage building, the kind that came from recognizing systematic injustice designed to protect those who'd learned to weaponize their advantages. So if they get away with it because I'm not perfect enough to be believed, they get away with it if you're not prepared. But Catherine, $50 million buys the best defense attorneys in the country, the finest private investigators, media consultants who can control narrative, and security teams who can keep you and Lily physically safe while the legal battle plays out. You can win this, but only if you're willing to fight strategically rather than emotionally. Lily stirred against Catherine's shoulder, murmuring something about carousel horses and music. Catherine stroked her daughter's hair, thinking about the choice Margaret had made. Isolation over exposure, silence over justice, protection over vindication. But Margaret had been alone. Catherine had Lily, had allies, had resources Margaret never possessed. And she had the evidence Margaret had spent 40 years compiling specifically so someone could finish what James Chun had started. I want to fight, but I need to protect Lily first. What does that look like? Webb nodded as if he'd expected this response. First, we complete the bond redemption quietly. No media, no announcement, just financial transaction. Second, we establish the legal defense trust and hire the team before the FBI goes public with the evidence. Third, we relocate you somewhere secure. Not an apartment, but an actual residence with property boundaries we can defend. And fourth, we prepare Lily for what's coming. How do you prepare a 7-year-old for her mother being publicly destroyed? You tell her the truth in terms she can understand. You make her part of the team rather than someone you're protecting from reality. And you show her that doing the right thing sometimes costs more than you want to pay, but silence costs even more. Agent Reeves joined them, her expression troubled. Catherine, we've completed preliminary review of your grandmother's files. She documented 47 individuals directly involved in the original espionage ring. Of those, 19 are deceased, 12 are in retirement with no current government or corporate positions, and 16 remain active in positions of influence. 16 people who could still hurt someone. 16 people who've spent decades assuming they were safe. The evidence is solid. Bank transfers, communications, testimony from your grandfather before his death that Margaret preserved on audio recordings. We can prosecute, but it's going to be messy. These aren't small targets. We're talking about former military officers who became defense contractors, intelligence analysts who moved into consulting, government officials who retired into lobbying. They have connections, resources, and decades of learning how to insulate themselves. When will the FBI go public? I'm recommending we wait until your financial transaction completes. Give you the resources to defend yourself before the counterattack begins. 2 weeks, maybe less if Mr. Webb can accelerate the bond redemption. Catherine looked between them. The attorney who saw legal strategy and the federal agent who saw justice deferred too long. Both were offering her the same thing. Time to prepare before the storm arrived. 2 weeks. We could do 2 weeks. The return to the secured apartment felt different now. Catherine wasn't just a desperate single mother who'd stumbled into unexpected wealth. She was the granddaughter of a woman who'd spent 40 years documenting corruption, the heir to a mission that transcended financial inheritance. Lily woke up as they entered the building, rubbing her eyes with fists still clutching Mr. Button's. Are we home? For now, baby. But we might need to move somewhere else soon. Somewhere more permanent. Can we bring the carousel horses? The question surprised Catherine until she realized Lily had been processing everything through the lens of what mattered most to a child. The magical horses that played music, the grandmother's love encoded in mechanics and melody. The carousel's still at Riverside Park. We'll need to figure out what to do with it. Webb, who'd followed them to ensure they reached the apartment safely, spoke up. Actually, I've been thinking about that. Catherine, restoring the carousel costs approximately $3 million. But consider what it represents. Your grandmother's 40-year monument to your grandfather, the delivery system for evidence that could bring down corrupt officials, and a genuine historical artifact from an era when carousels were built to last generations. You think I should restore it? I think you should turn it into something that honors both your grandparents while serving a purpose they'd approve. A public memorial, perhaps. a place where people can experience the music your grandfather designed and learn about the sacrifices both he and Margaret made. Lily's face lit up with understanding. Like a museum, but with horses people can ride. Exactly like that, Webb agreed. And Catherine, here's the strategic element. A restored carousel, properly publicized, creates a positive narrative before the negative one emerges. You become the devoted granddaughter honoring family legacy rather than the troubled veteran making accusations. It gives you moral high ground before the fight begins. Catherine saw the logic even as part of her rebelled against turning her grandmother's monument into tactical advantage. But Margaret had been practical above all else, had built the carousel as functional vault rather than sentimental memorial. She'd understand using it strategically if strategy served justice. How long would restoration take? With unlimited budget and priority scheduling? 6 months. We hire the best carousel restoration firm in the country. Document the entire process, create a media narrative around preserving American craftsmanship and honoring military service. By the time the FBI goes public with the espionage evidence, you're already established as someone who respects history and honors sacrifice. And the people my grandmother documented, they become the villains in a story where you're clearly the hero. Much harder to destroy someone's credibility when they've just spent $3 million restoring a historic carousel as tribute to their grandfather's military service. The cynicism of it made Catherine's stomach twist, but she couldn't deny the effectiveness. Public opinion mattered in legal battles, especially against defendants who'd spent decades cultivating respectable facades. Okay, we restore the carousel. But Webb, I want it done right. Not just for strategy, but because Margaret deserves to have her work preserved properly. Understood. I'll contact restoration specialists tomorrow. After Webb left, Catherine and Lily settled into evening routine that had become familiar over the past week. Nebulizer treatment for Lily's improving bronchitis, dinner from groceries that didn't require calculating cost, homework at the kitchen table, while Catherine tried not to think about the $100 million that would soon transform every calculation. Lily finished her math worksheet, then looked at Catherine with unexpected seriousness. Mommy, when we have lots of money, can we help other kids whose mommies don't have enough? The question landed like a gift Catherine hadn't known she needed. What do you mean? Like how we didn't have enough for my medicine, and Dr. Webb helped us. Can we help other people who need medicine but can't pay? Catherine pulled Lily close, overwhelmed by her daughter's instinctive generosity. They'd been surviving on $93 in eviction notices 3 weeks ago, and Lily's first thought about wealth was sharing it with others facing the same struggle. Yes, baby, we can help lots of people. Would you like that? I think Grandma Margaret would like it. She kept secrets to protect people. Maybe we can use her treasure to help people, too. That night, after Lily fell asleep in the princess bed strangers had provided during their most desperate moment, Catherine sat by the window looking out at Billings and thinking about legacy. James Chun had died protecting classified information from foreign agents. Margaret Chun had spent 40 years documenting the corruption that killed him, and now Catherine held both their legacies. The wealth James had prevented from funding espionage, and the evidence Margaret had compiled to ensure justice eventually arrived. But Lily's question reframed everything. The money wasn't just legal defense funds or carousel restoration budget. It was opportunity to transform pain into purpose, to make Margaret's isolation and James's death mean something beyond legal prosecutions and historical footnotes. Catherine pulled out her phone and drafted an email to Marcus Webb. In addition to the carousel restoration, I want to establish a foundation. Medical expenses for uninsured children, legal aid for families facing eviction, emergency funds for single parents in crisis. Use whatever portion of the $50 million discretionary funds you think appropriate. Let me know what legal structures make sense. She sent it before second-guessing could intervene, then returned to watching the city lights and wondering what Margaret would think about her granddaughter turning bearer bonds into breathing treatments for kids whose mothers worked double shifts at diners. Morning brought Webb's response, enthusiastic and detailed. He'd already contacted foundation attorneys, had preliminary structures outlined, and had estimated $10 million could be deployed annually if invested properly, helping thousands of families while preserving principal for future generations. This is strategically brilliant, his email concluded. You'll be known for generosity before the attacks begin. But Catherine, more than strategy, this is right. Your grandmother would approve. The bond redemption completed on day 12. Webb called at 9 a.m. with news delivered in carefully controlled tones that couldn't quite hide his satisfaction. The Swiss bank has confirmed transfer. Catherine, you now have $104 million in your account, slightly more than projected due to favorable exchange rates. After we move $20 million to the Legal Defense Trust and $30 million to investment accounts, you'll have $54 million in liquid assets. Catherine sat down, legs suddenly unreliable. $54 million. The number meant nothing and everything simultaneously. It was security beyond anything she'd imagined, and responsibility heavier than she'd prepared to carry. What happens now? Now we prepare for the FBI announcement. Agent Reeves is scheduling a press conference for tomorrow morning. She'll present the evidence, name the individuals under investigation, and explain how your grandmother's 40-year documentation made the prosecutions possible. You'll be identified as Margaret Chen's granddaughter and heir, which means media will find you within hours. Should I make a statement? I've prepared one, but you don't have to use it. The key points: you're honoring your grandmother's courage. You support the FBI's investigation fully, and you're establishing a foundation to help families facing hardship. We keep it brief, sympathetic, and focused on service rather than accusation. When should we release it? Immediately after the FBI announcement. We control the narrative from the beginning. Lily emerged from her bedroom, moving without the cough that had plagued her for weeks. The antibiotics had done their work, and Catherine's daughter was healthy for the first time since they'd arrived in Montana. Mommy, can we visit the carousel today? Catherine had been avoiding Riverside Park since the vault breach, letting security teams and county officials handle the property. But Lily's question made her realize she'd been treating the carousel as tactical asset rather than what it really was. Margaret's love letter encoded in wood and music, and stubborn refusal to let death silence truth. Yes, baby. Let's go see the carousel. James arranged security escort with his usual efficiency, but the convoy to Riverside Park felt less like military operation and more like pilgrimage. Catherine had called ahead to Robert Martinez, who'd agreed to meet them at the property with structural assessment updates. The carousel looked worse than Catherine remembered. Weeks of November weather had accelerated deterioration, and the platform now tilted at an angle suggesting imminent collapse. But Martinez greeted them with surprising optimism. Miss Wells, I've been consulting with Carson & Associates, the carousel restoration firm Mr. Webb contacted. They reviewed the structural photos and are confident they can save it. The horses that remain are salvageable with proper treatment. The mechanical works need complete rebuilding, but your grandfather's music system is actually easier to restore than original carousel band organs. This is doable. How do we begin? First, we stabilize the structure to prevent further collapse. That takes about 2 weeks. Then we extract the horses and mechanical works for off-site restoration while we rebuild the platform and carousel house. The whole project runs 6 to 8 months, but Carson & Associates can start immediately if you authorize. Catherine looked at the ruined carousel, trying to see it as Margaret must have seen it, not as property or inheritance, but as promise kept across 40 years of isolation. James Chun had designed the music system before his final deployment. Margaret had maintained it through decades when no one else cared. Now Catherine would restore it properly, completing a circle that had waited 2 generations to close. Authorize it. And Martinez, I want public access when it's finished. Not just a memorial, but a working carousel where kids can ride and hear the music my grandfather created. Martinez's smile suggested he'd hoped for exactly this response. I'll coordinate with Carson & Associates. They'll need initial payment to begin work, probably $500,000 to cover stabilization and planning. Catherine pulled out her phone and texted Webb. Authorize $500,000 payment to carousel restoration. We're starting today. His response came within seconds. Done. Wire transfer initiating now. Catherine, you're going to make a lot of people very happy. Lily had approached the carousel despite security concerns, standing at the water's edge and staring at the partially submerged horses. Catherine joined her, both of them looking at what remained of Margaret's monument. When the carousel is fixed, can I ride the white horse? The one that plays the first notes. Yes, baby. You can ride whichever horse you want. I want to ride the white one because that's the horse that starts Grandma Margaret's song. And every time I ride it, I'll remember she loved us even when she couldn't be close. Catherine's vision blurred with tears she didn't try to hide. Lily had understood what Catherine had been struggling to articulate. The carousel wasn't just historical artifact or tactical asset. It was evidence that love persisted through decades of forced separation. That sacrifice meant something beyond the moment it was made, that family could be reclaimed even from silence and isolation. They returned to the apartment to find Agent Reeves waiting with final preparation for the next day's press conference. She spread documents across the dining table, evidence summaries, timeline of investigations, photographs of the individuals who'd be named. Catherine, I need you to understand what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., the FBI announces prosecutions against 16 individuals for espionage, conspiracy, and related charges spanning 4 decades. We'll credit your grandmother's documentation as the evidentiary foundation. Media will identify you as her heir within hours. And then their lawyers go to work. They'll file motions to suppress evidence, challenge your grandmother's competence to collect surveillance, argue that 40-year-old allegations are beyond statute of limitations. They'll investigate you personally, every job you've had, every relationship, every moment they can twist into evidence of bias or instability. This gets ugly, Catherine. Very ugly, very fast. I'm ready. Are you? Reeves's question carried genuine concern rather than challenge. You've been living in survival mode for years. You've got PTSD from military service, recent eviction, history of financial struggle. They'll use all of it to paint you as someone with mental health issues, making accusations for attention and money. Let them try. Margaret documented everything. The evidence speaks for itself. Evidence is only as good as the witness who presents it. And Catherine, you're going to be on trial as much as they are. Can you handle that? Can you watch them dissect your life on national television while their expensive lawyers explain why nothing you say can be trusted? Catherine thought about sleeping in motels that smelled like cigarettes, about counting pennies to buy bread, about Lily wearing coats that didn't fit because new ones cost too much. She thought about Margaret spending 40 years isolated and alone, maintaining surveillance on people who'd killed her husband and escaped justice. They think I'll break because I've been broken before. But Agent Reeves, I've been broken by circumstances I couldn't control. Poverty, PTSD, bad luck, and worse timing. This is different. This is choosing to fight for something that matters. That kind of breaking builds you different than the kind that happens to you. Reeves studied Catherine with an expression that suggested reassessment. Your grandmother chose well. You're stronger than they'll expect. I'm desperate enough not to care what they expect. And I've got $50 million to fund not caring. That changes the calculation. The press conference happened at 10:02 a.m. on a gray November morning that felt appropriate for announcing prosecutions that had waited 4 decades. Catherine watched from the secured apartment, Lily beside her, both of them staring at the television as Agent Reeves stood before cameras and delivered justice Margaret had died believing might never arrive. Today, the Federal Bureau of Investigation is announcing charges against 16 individuals connected to an espionage ring that operated from 1981 through 1984, selling classified weapons development information to foreign agents. The ring was initially exposed by U.S. Army Colonel James Chun, who died in 1984, preventing the final transaction. His widow, Margaret Chun, spent the next 40 years documenting the individuals involved and tracking their subsequent activities. Her evidence has made these prosecutions possible. The names scrolled across the screen: former military officers, defense contractors, consultants, and lobbyists. Some Catherine recognized from Margaret's basement photographs. Others were strangers who'd apparently learned to hide their corruption behind respectable facades. Reeves continued. Mrs. Chun maintained her surveillance operation in secret until her death 6 months ago, protecting the evidence in secure locations on her property. Her granddaughter, Catherine Wells, a U.S. Marine Corps veteran, discovered the evidence while settling her grandmother's estate and immediately contacted federal authorities. The camera phones started immediately. Catherine's phone buzzed with calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Reporters, probably, finding her contact information through public records or creative research. She ignored them all, focusing on Reeves's presentation. The individuals charged today spent decades building careers and fortunes on the foundation of espionage proceeds. They believed Colonel Chin's sacrifice had been meaningless, that Mrs. Chun would take her secrets to the grave. They were wrong. Justice delayed is still justice. And today we honor both Colonel and Mrs. Chun by ensuring their work was not in vain. Questions erupted from the assembled media. Reeves fielded them with professional efficiency, providing enough detail to satisfy curiosity while protecting investigative integrity. Yes, the evidence was substantial. Yes, prosecutions would proceed despite the time elapsed. Yes, the FBI had verified authenticity of all documentation. And then the question Catherine had been expecting. Agent Reeves, can you tell us more about Catherine Wells and how she discovered this evidence? Miss Wells is a decorated Marine Corps veteran who served with distinction for 8 years. She inherited her grandmother's property, discovered the secured evidence, and demonstrated exactly the kind of integrity and courage her grandfather displayed 40 years ago. She's asked for privacy during this time, but she's fully cooperating with our investigation. Webb's prepared statement went out 30 minutes later, posted to a website his firm had created overnight. Catherine read it one final time before publication. My grandmother, Margaret Chun, spent 40 years keeping a promise to my grandfather that the people who killed him would eventually face justice. I'm honored to help her keep that promise. In her memory, I'm establishing the James and Margaret Chun Foundation to provide emergency assistance to families facing medical, legal, and financial hardship. My grandparents believed in service and sacrifice. The foundation will ensure their legacy helps others facing the kinds of struggles I've experienced personally. I support the FBI's investigation fully and hope these prosecutions demonstrate that corruption has consequences regardless of how much time passes or how powerful the perpetrators become. I'm requesting privacy for my family during this time, but I want to thank everyone who's offered support and encouragement. Justice delayed is still justice. My grandparents never stopped believing that, and neither will I. The media response was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour, Catherine's statement had been shared thousands of times. Major networks requested interviews. Her phone continued buzzing with calls she didn't answer. But alongside the attention came exactly what Webb and Reeves had warned about, the counterattack. Lawyers for the accused individuals released their own statements, attacking the evidence's authenticity, questioning Margaret's mental competence, suggesting Catherine was a troubled veteran with financial motivation to fabricate accusations. One statement particularly stung. Miss Wells has a documented history of financial instability, recent eviction, and mental health treatment for PTSD. Her sudden accusations against respected professionals, coinciding with her inheritance of valuable property, raise obvious questions about motivation and reliability. Lily, who'd been reading social media comments on Catherine's phone despite instructions not to, looked up with tears in her eyes. Mommy, they're saying mean things about you. They're saying you're lying. Catherine knelt beside her daughter, taking the phone gently. Baby, people who do bad things always say people catching them are the real liars. It's what they have to do because they can't argue with the truth. So they attack the person telling it instead. But it's not fair. No, it's not fair. But fairness isn't about making everyone play nice. It's about making sure everyone faces consequences eventually. And these people are about to face consequences they've avoided for 40 years. Webb called that evening with updates that confirmed the battle had truly begun. 3 of the accused have filed motions to dismiss, challenging the statute of limitations. Two have filed defamation suits against you personally, claiming you knowingly made false accusations. And someone leaked your eviction records to the media. They're framing you as desperate and opportunistic. Can they win? The defamation suits? No. Truth is absolute defense, and we have evidence. The motions to dismiss? Possibly on some charges, but espionage has longer statute of limitations than standard crimes. We'll win more than we lose. But Catherine, this is going to get worse before it improves. Are you prepared for that? Catherine looked around the secured apartment that had become their temporary home, at Lily doing homework at the table, at the security monitors showing guards who maintained constant vigilance against threats from people with resources and motivation to silence inconvenient truth. I survived Kandahar. I survived PTSD and divorce and poverty and eviction. I can survive rich people hiring expensive lawyers to call me a liar. That's the spirit. Oh, and Catherine, Carson and Associates started stabilization work on the carousel today. They're documenting everything, creating a video series about the restoration. It's getting tremendous positive media attention. You're being framed as devoted granddaughter honoring family legacy, while the opposition looks like rich criminals attacking a veteran single mother. The optics are strongly in our favor. When can we move out of the apartment? I appreciate the security, but Lily needs stability beyond temporary housing. I've identified 3 properties that meet security requirements: gated communities, controlled access, defendable perimeters. All are within an hour of Billings. You can tour them this weekend if you'd like. Yes, let's find somewhere permanent. The house Catherine chose sat on 5 acres outside Red Lodge, backed by national forest that ensured privacy and fronted by a gate that required authorization for access. It was far larger than anything she'd imagined owning. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, an office where she could work on foundation planning, and a yard where Lily could play without security concerns. The price was $800,000, an amount that would have been incomprehensible 3 weeks ago, but now barely registered against the $54 million Catherine had available. Webb handled the purchase paperwork while James coordinated security installation, cameras, sensors, reinforced doors, safe room in case of emergency. They moved in 2 weeks after the FBI announcement, during which time Catherine's life had become a surreal mixture of legal depositions, media attention, and slowly learning to think like someone with wealth rather than someone desperate to survive. The foundation paperwork completed, with first grants scheduled to distribute within a month. Carson and Associates reported the carousel restoration was proceeding ahead of schedule, with several horses already undergoing treatment in their workshop. And the FBI had secured indictments against 14 of the 16 accused individuals, with trials scheduled to begin in 9 months. But the attacks continued. Someone leaked Catherine's military medical records, highlighting her PTSD treatment and attempting to frame her as unstable. Anonymous social media accounts spread rumors about her fitness as a mother, suggesting Lily should be removed from her care. The defamation suits expanded to include accusations that she'd fabricated evidence for financial gain. Webb's legal team countered each attack methodically, but the cumulative effect wore on Catherine in ways she hadn't anticipated. She'd expected to feel relief once they were settled in the house, once Lily had her own room and security measures ensured their safety. Instead, she felt increasingly isolated, aware that every public appearance brought risk of confrontation or harassment. Lily noticed, of course. Children always noticed when their parents were struggling, even when adults try to hide it. "Mommy, are you sad about the mean people?" They were sitting in the new house's living room, evening light filtering through windows that overlooked forest. Catherine had been staring at her laptop, reading legal filings she didn't fully understand, trying to process that the fight she'd chosen would last years rather than months. A little sad, mostly angry that they're trying so hard to avoid consequences. But Grandma Margaret waited 40 years. We can wait too, right? The simple logic steadied Catherine more than any legal strategy or security measure could. Lily was right. Margaret had waited 4 decades, maintaining surveillance and documentation through isolation and silence. Catherine had wealth, allies, legal representation, and public support. The fight was survivable even if it wasn't comfortable. Yes, baby, we can wait as long as it takes. 6 months later, the carousel restoration reached a milestone worth celebrating. Carson and Associates invited Catherine and Lily to their workshop to see the horses, now fully restored to their original beauty. The white stallion that played the first notes of Clair de Lune stood on a display platform, its paint renewed to colors that suggested how it must have looked when James Chun first designed the musical mechanism. The craftsmanship visible in every detail, the flowing mane, the jeweled saddle, the expression that seemed almost alive despite being carved wood. Lily approached it with reverence, reaching out to touch the mane the way she'd touched it that first day at the ruined carousel. The horse responded with 3 perfect notes, crystalline and clear, technology James had installed 40 years ago, functioning exactly as intended. "It remembers," Lily whispered. "It remembers Grandma Margaret's song." Catherine felt tears streaming down her face without shame or attempt to hide them. The horse did remember. Through decades of exposure and neglect, through the vault beneath it and the surveillance Margaret maintained, through all of it, James Chin's creation had preserved the melody he'd chosen to represent love across generations. The other 11 horses stood in various stages of restoration, each one receiving the same meticulous attention. Carson and Associates' lead craftsman, a woman named Elena Rodriguez, explained the process with obvious pride. "Your grandfather was an exceptional engineer. The musical mechanism is genius. Each horse contains isolated tone generators powered by proximity sensors he installed in the 1980s. Technology that was cutting edge then and still impressive now. We're preserving everything, adding only what's necessary to meet modern safety standards." "When will they be ready to install?" "Platform reconstruction completes in 6 weeks. Then we install the mechanical works and the horses, wire everything for power and music system testing. You're looking at opening day in late August, right on schedule." "And the carousel house?" "Being rebuilt to original specifications, with modern weatherproofing hidden beneath period-appropriate exteriors. This won't look restored, Miss Wells. It'll look like it never failed." Catherine scheduled the carousel's reopening for August 15th, with ceremony planned to honor both James and Margaret Chin. The FBI had agreed to coordinate timing with trial schedules. Several prosecutions would be concluding around the same time, creating a narrative arc from exposure to justice to memorial. But 2 weeks before the planned opening, Webb called with news that threatened to derail everything. "Catherine, we have a problem. One of the accused, David Morrison, former Army intelligence officer, has filed a motion claiming ownership rights to the carousel property. He's arguing that he and Colonel Chun were business partners in the original carousel purchase, that Margaret stole his investment after James died, and that you're currently in possession of property that's partially his. That's insane. My grandmother owned the carousel for 40 years. His lawyers are producing documents, partnership agreements, financial records, letters that suggest Chun and Morrison were collaborating on the carousel purchase. They're claiming Margaret forged subsequent documents to erase Morrison's ownership stake after James died. Can they prove it? They're going to try. And Catherine, Morrison is the man you remember from childhood, the one with the military tattoo who argued with your grandmother at the fence. He's been waiting decades for an opportunity to claim what he believes James stole from him." Catherine felt ice spreading through her chest. The original bearer bonds. Morrison thinks he's entitled to them. Exactly. He's arguing that the bonds were partnership assets, that Margaret had no right to hide them, and that you've profited from theft that dates back 40 years. If he can establish ownership claim, he might be entitled to percentage of the redemption value. How much? Potentially up to 50%. We're talking about $50 million, Catherine. He's filed a civil suit separate from the criminal proceedings, and he's got very expensive lawyers who clearly believe they can win. Catherine thought about Margaret arguing with Morrison at the fence, about her grandmother's careful words. David wants things that don't belong to him. Margaret had known Morrison would eventually try to claim the bonds. She'd spent 40 years preparing evidence to refute any such claim. Webb, My grandmother's basement vault contained 40 years of surveillance on Morrison and the others. If he was legitimately entitled to any portion of the carousel or the bonds, she would have acknowledged it. The fact that she didn't suggest she had evidence proving his supposed partnership was fraudulent. Then we need to find that evidence. Because Morrison's filing is convincing enough that the judge hasn't dismissed it outright. We have a hearing in 3 weeks to determine whether his ownership claim has merit. Catherine returned to Margaret's basement, now empty of surveillance files that had gone to the FBI, but still containing her grandmother's personal effects. She'd been avoiding the space, but now she searched systematically for anything that might address Morrison's claim. In a desk drawer beneath false bottom, she found a sealed envelope marked for Catherine, Re. David Morrison's lies. Inside were 3 documents. First, a partnership agreement between James Chun and David Morrison, dated 1983, exactly as Morrison's lawyers had claimed. Second, a dissolution agreement, dated 1984, where Morrison signed away all rights to the carousel property in exchange for payment of $50,000. His signature was notarized, witnessed, legally binding. And third, a letter from James Chun to Margaret, dated 1 week before his death. Margaret, David Morrison approached me about investing in the carousel together. I agreed initially, thinking partnership would provide cover for what I was really building, the vault to hide the bonds and documents. But Morrison discovered my true purpose. He demanded partnership in the vault's contents, claiming he deserved percentage of whatever I was protecting because he'd helped finance the carousel construction. I paid him $50,000 to dissolve our partnership and go away. He signed papers agreeing he had no claim to carousel property or anything beneath it. But I don't trust him. If something happens to me, Morrison will try to claim the bonds. He'll produce the original partnership agreement and hide the dissolution. Don't let him succeed. The dissolution papers are your proof that he sold his interest and has no legitimate claim. Keep the carousel, keep the vault, keep everything I protected. Morrison is part of the corruption I'm exposing. He doesn't deserve anything except prosecution. Catherine photographed the documents and sent them to Webb immediately. His response came within minutes. This is exactly what we needed. Morrison's claim collapses without the dissolution agreement. I'm filing an emergency motion to dismiss his suit with prejudice. Catherine, your grandmother thought of everything. The hearing 3 weeks later lasted less than an hour. Webb presented the dissolution agreement. Morrison's lawyers scrambled to argue it was forged, and the judge, clearly annoyed at having her time wasted with frivolous litigation, dismissed the suit and ordered Morrison to pay Catherine's legal fees for the defense. Outside the courtroom, Morrison himself confronted Catherine with rage, poorly contained behind his attorney's restraining hand. Your grandfather stole from me. Your grandmother stole from me. Now you're stealing from me using forged documents and federal protection. This isn't over. Catherine met his gaze without flinching. My grandfather died stopping people like you from profiting off treason. My grandmother spent 40 years documenting your crimes. And I'm finishing what they started. You're right about one thing. This isn't over. It's just beginning. Security escorted her away before Morrison could respond. But Catherine felt satisfaction that had nothing to do with money or property ownership. Margaret had protected her family's legacy against someone who'd spent decades believing he'd eventually steal it. And Catherine had used that protection exactly as intended. The carousel's opening day arrived with weather that seemed deliberately perfect. Clear sky, comfortable temperature, gentle breeze that made the restored flags flutter without threatening structural stability. 300 people gathered at Riverside Park, invited guests mingling with media and curious locals who'd followed the story from desperate veterans' inheritance to federal prosecution to restored historical monument. Lily wore a new dress for the occasion, blue with white horses embroidered along the hem, purchased specifically for this moment. She'd insisted on the horse pattern, saying she wanted to match the carousel on its special day. Catherine stood before the assembled crowd, notes prepared but ultimately unnecessary. She knew what needed to be said. 41 years ago, my grandfather designed this carousel's musical mechanism as a gift for my grandmother. He embedded Claire de Lune into 12 carved horses, creating something beautiful that would survive whatever happened to him. 3 months later, he died protecting classified information from people who'd betrayed their country for profit. My grandmother spent the next 40 years maintaining this carousel and documenting the crimes that killed her husband. She lived in isolation, separated from family, protecting evidence she believed would someday matter. She died alone, hoping someone would finish what she'd started. Today, we honor both of them. This carousel is restored through my grandparents' sacrifice, not just their courage, but the financial instruments my grandfather prevented from funding espionage and my grandmother preserved for 4 decades. The James and Margaret Chin Foundation will be funded by those same instruments, helping families facing the kinds of struggles I experienced before inheriting their legacy. But this carousel isn't a memorial to the dead. It's a promise to the living, a promise that corruption has consequences, that truth persists through decades of silence, that love embedded in music and mechanics survives isolation and loss, that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when they refuse to let injustice win. The applause that followed felt earned rather than polite. Agent Reeves spoke next, announcing that 14 of 16 accused individuals had been convicted at trial, with sentences ranging from 12 to 30 years. Justice, delayed by 4 decades, had finally arrived. Then Elena Rodriguez invited everyone to approach the carousel, to see the restored horses, to hear the music James Chun had created. The horses stood on their platform, circling mechanically just as they had in 1983, each one perfect in ways that suggested not just restoration but resurrection. Lily was given the honor of the first ride. She chose the white stallion, the horse that played the first notes, and Catherine lifted her onto its back. When the carousel began to turn, when a musical mechanism engaged and Claire de Lune filled the air with crystalline perfection, Catherine saw her daughter's face transform with joy so pure it hurt to witness. The melody continued as the carousel spun, horses rising and falling, music building through all 12 creatures, completing the song James Chun had embedded across separate components and Margaret Chun had maintained through decades of isolation. When the ride ended, Lily dismounted and ran to Catherine with tears streaming down her face. "Mommy, I could feel Grandma Margaret and Great-Grandpa James. They were right there with me." The music held them. Catherine pulled her daughter close, both of them crying now without shame or attempt to hide emotion that demanded release. The carousel had preserved not just music but presence, not just mechanics but meaning. James and Margaret Chun had built something that survived their deaths, that waited 40 years to be discovered, that transformed inheritance into justice and silence into symphony. People lined up for rides throughout the afternoon. Children who'd come with families, veterans who'd heard about the Chin's military service, locals who'd watched the property decline for decades and wanted to see it restored. The carousel spun continuously, Claire de Lune, playing on repeat, each cycle a reminder that beauty could be reclaimed from ruin if someone cared enough to do the work. As evening approached and the crowd began to thin, Marcus Webb found Catherine standing by the fence where Margaret used to argue with Morrison. He brought champagne and 2 glasses, though Catherine suspected he knew she wouldn't drink more than a toast. "To your grandparents," Webb raised his glass, and to finishing what they started. Catherine clinked her glass against his. "To them, and to Lily for reminding me what matters." The Foundation's first grants distributed yesterday. 20 families receive assistance with medical bills, 15 with legal expenses, 32 with emergency housing. Your grandparents' legacy is already helping hundreds of people. How much is left? After today's expenses and the grants? Approximately $38 million in accessible funds, with another $30 million in investments generating income. You'll be able to maintain this level of charitable giving indefinitely. The foundation will outlive you, Catherine. It'll help people for generations. Catherine watched Lily playing near the carousel, talking to other children about the horses and the music and the grandmother she'd never met but somehow knew intimately through encoded love and mechanical memory. Webb, I want to establish an endowment for carousel preservation. Other carousels around the country are in the same condition this one was: ignored, deteriorating, forgotten. Let's save them. Let's show people that beauty matters, that history matters, that things built with care deserve to be maintained. How much are you thinking? $5 million to start. More if the foundations return supported. And I want to tie it to the Chen story. Every carousel we restore gets a plaque explaining how this started, honoring people who built and protected beautiful things when others said they weren't worth saving. Webb smiled with genuine warmth. Your grandmother chose very well. You're exactly the granddaughter she hoped you'd become. I'm just finishing what she started. No, you're transforming it into something bigger than she imagined. Margaret protected evidence and waited for justice. You're using the proceeds to build justice, actively helping people rather than passively documenting crimes. That's evolution, Catherine. That's taking a good thing and making it better. The sun set behind the restored carousel house, throwing long shadows across the pond that had once threatened to swallow Margaret's monument entirely. The structure stood firm now, platform level, horses perfect, music crystalline. Visitors continued arriving even as evening progressed, drawn by media coverage and word of mouth about the beautiful carousel that played songs containing hidden meaning. Catherine found herself standing in the same spot where she'd stood that first day, $93 in her account, Lily's hand in hers, looking at a ruined structure she'd bought for $850 and couldn't afford to demolish. 3 months had transformed everything. Not just finances, though the money mattered, but perspective, purpose, understanding of what inheritance really meant. Margaret hadn't left her property. Margaret had left her mission. The work of continuing to care when others stopped caring, of maintaining what others abandoned, of believing that truth and beauty and justice mattered enough to sacrifice comfort and connection. Catherine had accepted that mission not because she wanted to, but because refusing would dishonor everything Margaret and James had given up. And in accepting it, she discovered what her grandmother must have learned 40 years earlier, that some things were worth more than safety, more than peace, more than the easy path that avoided conflict. Lily appeared beside her, slipping a small hand into Catherine's. Mommy, when I grow up, can I take care of the carousel? Yes, baby. And the foundation, and whatever else we build that needs protecting. Like Grandma Margaret protected things? Exactly like that. Some things are worth maintaining even when it's hard, even when other people don't understand, even when it costs more than you thought you could afford. But we can afford it now, right? Because of the treasure. Catherine thought about the bearer bonds, about James Chun preventing their use to fund espionage, about Margaret hiding them for 40 years until someone honest could redeem them. Treasure wasn't the right word, though a child could be forgiven for thinking so. Yes, baby, because of what your great-grandparents protected, we can afford to take care of beautiful things now. We can afford to help people who need help. We can afford to finish what they started. And we're going to do it forever, for as long as we can. And when we can't anymore, we'll leave it for someone else to continue. That's what legacy means, work that outlasts the people who started. The carousel spun behind them, music playing for visitors who'd stayed past closing time, reluctant to leave something so beautiful. Catherine watched them ride the horses her grandfather had helped craft, listen to the melody he'd encoded, experience the love Margaret had maintained through decades that should have broken anyone less determined. This was what inheritance really meant. Not property or money or even justice, though all those mattered. Inheritance was responsibility to continue work that others had started, to maintain beauty that others had created, to transform pain into purpose and silence into symphony. Catherine Mitchell had inherited $160 million and a ruined carousel. But more than that, she'd inherited her grandparents' belief that some things mattered enough to fight for, even when fighting cost everything. The carousel played on into the night, Claire de Lune, echoing across Riverside Park the way it had 40 years ago, the way it would 40 years hence, carried forward by people who understood that beauty preserved was love made permanent. And in the music, if you listen carefully, you could hear Margaret Chun singing to her granddaughter across decades of forced separation, singing that love persisted through silence, that truth waited patiently for discovery, that carousels could carry memory across generations if someone cared enough to keep the horses spinning and the music playing and the legacy alive. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.